how did kings Ashoka and Kanishka spread Indian culture? Shubh says, how did emperors like Ashoka the Great and Kanishka the Great spread Indian culture? And to what extent did they spread Indian culture? Okay. So Ashoka obviously comes first. Kanishka comes a few centuries later. Ashoka was the great unifier of the subcontinent, the grandson of Emperor Chandragupta Maurya. Ashoka may or may not have personally known Shri Vishnugupta Chanakya. Possibly as a child he may have known him. But Ashoka took the empire to its greatest extent. He unified the entire subcontinent and kind of, it was a gigantic empire. And a pretty stable empire, hugely prosperous empire, strict iron control of the empire, no tolerance for any nonsense, nothing, okay? And that's how empires have to be run. So Ashoka was fantastic, he was brilliant, he's rightfully called Ashoka the Great. Personally, he may have been a cruel guy or whatever, that's okay, I don't care. So he did a brilliant job of unifying the subcontinent. And then after the entire business of fighting and defeating all the various rebels or whatever, after defeating everybody who could have challenged him, then he became a peaceful guy and he started spreading Dhamma. So at the time you had Buddhism all over India, Bauddha Dharma. So he became a great patron of Bauddha Dharma. He did great public works and he sent embassies to various parts of the world. He sent embassies to Greece, and the embassies would include large numbers of bhikkhus and priests and all who would spread our culture to those parts of the world. So Ashoka says that he had spread Dhamma to Greece, which means he would have sent embassies with religious scholars to Greece. He also sent embassies to Sri Lanka. Two of his children, Mahendra and what was the girl's name, his daughter's name? Ashoka's daughter, what was her name? The son's name was Mahendra. Okay, I forget the girl's name, his daughter's name. But those two siblings, children of Ashoka, they went to Sri Lanka and they brought with them a sapling that was derived from the original Bodhi tree. It was planted in Sri Lanka. It still exists today, the same tree. Sanghamitra, Mahendra and Sanghamitra. They were the two children. He had many children, but two of those were Mahendra and Sanghamitra. They went to Sri Lanka and they spread Dhamma there. And Sri Lanka, till today, is mostly Buddhist, right? It's a Buddhist majority country. Ashoka also spread Dhamma to Suvarnabhumi, which is Thailand and mostly Thailand and Southeast Asia. So he did all he could to spread our culture far and wide all across the neighboring parts of the world. So that's what Ashoka did. And he also, funded and financed the construction of all kinds of temples and monasteries and viharas and Mahavira viharas and whatever else he could do. He was a very generous king and he was a great patron of our culture, and he did his best to spread our culture beyond the physical boundaries of the Indian subcontinent. So that is Ashoka. Kanishka. What about Kanishka? So Kanishka was a descendant of immigrants. He was a descendant of Tushara kings. The Tusharas were in English they're called the Tokharians. They lived in the Xinjiang region, the Tarim Basin region. That's where they originated as far as we know. Obviously, they would have originated somewhere else beyond that. How did they arrive in Xinjiang? We're not quite sure. But you still find mummies of these people there in the Tarim Basin region. They're called the Tarim Basin mummies or something. And if you look at the mummies, they are white-skinned and they generally have blonde or red hair. But their genetics are R1A1A, the male genetics, which is exactly the same as most Indians. So, interesting thing. And the Tokharian language was a Centum language, not a Satem language, which is like two divisions of the Indo-European language family. And the gods they worshipped, the Tokharians, were our gods. So, very interesting combination. So, those are the origins of the Tushara people, the Kushans eventually. The Chinese called them the Yuezhi, and eventually they came to be known as the Kushans. So the Kushans had to flee from the Hunnic expansion which came out of Mongolia, and by fleeing they had to displace the Scythians from wherever they were, and the Kushans eventually started settling down in the northwestern parts of the subcontinent, and they expanded their kingdom gradually by displacing the Indo-Greeks, And eventually you have the birth of Kanishka, who went on to be the greatest of the emperors of the Kushan Empire and one of our greatest emperors ever. And his empire encompassed much of northern western India, parts of the Deccan also. He had two capitals, one was Mathura, one was Purushpur, which is present day Peshawar. And through Mathura, he was able to administer the Indian subcontinent, all of it, whatever parts he controlled, which was the majority of it. And through Peshawar, he was able, through Purushpur, he was able to administer Central Asia. So understand the size of Kanishka's empire. The maps that you will see, they will not tell you the entire story. He ruled over northern, western, central India, all the way up to Patliputra. Patliputra was part of his empire. So eastern India as well. Not sure about Assam and the far east states of India today. Definitely not southern India. But all of that part of India and Kashmir. He was very fond of Kashmir. Kanishka was in love with Kashmir for some reason. There is a town called Kanishkapur in Kashmir. It is called Kanishpur or something today. So he was in love with Kashmir for some reason, Kanishka. Maybe he spent his childhood there, I'm not really sure. And his empire also stretched from the shores of the Caspian and Aral Sea all the way to Xinjiang, present day Xinjiang in currently part of China. Gigantic empire. And through that, because of that, he controlled all the trade between India and China in the east and Rome in the west. He controlled all of that. He was the middleman. He took taxes for both ways. And his empire became enormously rich as a consequence, which is our land became enormously rich as a consequence. And he was a great patron of culture. During his rule, two different schools of culture essentially thrived in the subcontinent. One is the Mathura School of Arts, the Mathura style of sculptures, very unique and distinctive style, the Mathura style. That's one. And the other one is the Gandhara style, the depictions of Buddha in the Hellenistic fashion, the Gandhara style. So two very different schools of art, they thrived during the time of Kanishka. And he obviously was the patron of all of that. He gave whatever financing was needed for all of this. He was obviously enormously wealthy. His empire was incredibly wealthy. And he patronized all the different religious manifestations that existed in India and Central Asia, whether it is the Bauddha Dharma, whether it is the Shaivite Dharma, whether it is the Vaishnava Dharma, whether it is Zoroastrianism, whether it's whatever. He was the patron of everything. Okay, he encouraged all these different manifestations of dharma or whatever it is. And obviously at that time still Buddhism, Bauddha Dharma was still the major dharmic form that was prevalent in the subcontinent. So that's why he was also a big patron of what we call Buddhism today. And he used to send embassies. His empire was a trading empire. He also controlled the great ports in Saurashtra, in Western India, that traded with Rome. So whenever he would send a trade delegation wherever, he made sure that he would send religious persons with those people, essentially religious gurus and teachers and whatnot. It may not have been that successful in the West because the West never became Indianized. Rome never became Indianized, right? You do find examples of Indian contact over there. For example, the Lakshmi of Herculaneum. So you do find archaeological evidence of the presence of Indians in Rome. But Rome never adopted Indian religion. Maybe it was just too far away. But he sent all these trade delegations and embassies to China. And through those, he sent dharmic gurus. Both the bhikshus and both the scholars and people who would be learned in the Vedas and whatnot. And because of Kanishka's activities, the whole of China eventually became Indianized. Kanishka is the man who did that. Kanishka. And through China, it spread to Korea, it spread to Japan, it spread wherever else, Mongolia, wherever else. So Kanishka is the man who was instrumental in Indianizing the whole of Eastern Asia. Tremendous. I mean, the kind of work he did, tireless and tremendous. He was in power for like 20, 30 years, that's it. And then we don't know what happened. He died. And his son Huvishka became the emperor. So Kanishka was this guy, super vigorous guy. His entire life was like expanding his empire, defeating one guy after the other. He even defeated the Parthians and took some bites of their territory, because why not? That sort of thing. But apart from the expansionist tendencies that he had, he was this great patron of culture, and he was this great spreader of Indian culture, especially eastwards. And through the actions of one man, the whole of China essentially became Indianized over time. But he is the guy who started all of that. And then after his death, and even after the dissolution of the Kushan Empire, the Chinese used to send embassies to India, to the Gupta emperors, asking for more scholars. Please send us more scholars with more Sanskrit sutras that they can translate into Chinese. So this entire process was started by Kanishka. Great man, one of our greatest emperors ever, if not our greatest emperor. So some people say that Kanishka was a foreigner. He was a descendant of immigrants. I mean, what was his culture? What did he do? Whose culture did he promote? Whose culture did he spread the worldwide? Our culture, right? Did he see himself as a foreigner? Really? If he saw himself as a foreigner, would he do that? I don't care what blood you may have. Anyway, the Kushans, the Tusharas were of Indian ancestry. They themselves in the Tarim region, river region, they used to practice our culture there itself, right? So yeah, I don't see Kanishka as a foreigner. What utter nonsense! Utter nonsense. Kanishka was one of the greatest Indians of all time.